The small-town bakery was a bustling little place, always busy with the hum of conversation and the warm, welcoming scent of freshly baked pastries filling the air. Its charm came from its local popularity, drawing people from all walks of life. There were children excitedly pressing their faces against the glass display cases, elderly couples sitting at tables with steaming mugs of coffee, and workers grabbing a quick bite before heading back to their jobs. The friendly chatter was a comforting soundtrack to the morning rush. In the corner of the bakery stood a woman who seemed out of place amid the cozy atmosphere. The rich lady was impeccably dressed in a designer coat, her heels clicking against the tiled floor with every step. Her long, shiny hair cascaded perfectly around her face, and she moved with a confidence that suggested she was used to getting what she wanted. She didn't seem to notice the hustle and bustle around her, her eyes scanning the shelves with a critical gaze. She was here for something specific, and she expected nothing less than perfection. Meanwhile, at the counter, a man in his 30s stood hesitantly, his eyes darting between the cakes on display. His clothes were old and worn, a sharp contrast to the woman beside him. He checked his wallet once again, his face flushed with anxiety. He was trying to buy a small cake for his daughter's birthday, the simplest one in the display. He felt a pang of embarrassment, knowing it wasn't much, but it was all he could afford. As the single dad reached for the simplest, least expensive cake on the shelf, the rich lady couldn't help but glance over at him. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a judgmental look crossing her face as she took in his worn clothes and the way he nervously fumbled through his wallet. A smirk tugged at the corners of her lips as she leaned closer to the counter, muttering under her breath just loud enough for him to hear, "Must be nice to live in a world where this is all you can afford." The words stung, even though the rich lady didn't intend for him to reply. She barely gave him a second glance as she straightened up, looking back at the higher-end pastries with a sense of superiority. To her, the cake was nothing but a small, insignificant purchase that didn't even seem to register as anything worth fussing over. But to the single dad, it was everything. It was a moment where he could make his daughter feel special even if he couldn't afford something extravagant. He felt his cheeks flush with a heat that wasn't just from embarrassment, but from something deeper, something he couldn't quite name. His heart sank and a quiet sadness washed over him as he continued to look down at the cake, focusing hard on his wallet, which seemed to mock him with its emptiness. He didn't respond to the rich lady's comment. He didn't want to engage with someone who would never understand his reality. All he wanted was to get out of the bakery and move on with his day, making the best of what he had. The rich lady, still unaware of the impact of her words, shifted her gaze to the other pastries, oblivious to the hurt she had caused. She casually picked up a cupcake, admiring its decorative icing with a smile, as if her brief remark had no weight. She was lost in her own world of privilege, enjoying her superiority, completely unaware of the quiet struggle she had just added to the man's day. The single dad walked to the counter with the cake, his mind far from the rich lady's judgment. He didn't have the luxury of time to dwell on such things. He had too much to worry about, too many things on his plate. His life was a constant balancing act, one that seemed to always tip in the wrong direction. He worked two jobs. By day he was a mechanic, fixing cars in a dusty small shop. His hands were rough from years of hard work, and the smell of oil and grease had become part of his skin. By night he worked as a delivery driver for a local restaurant, driving through rain and snow, late into the evening, delivering meals to people who rarely gave him more than a passing glance. The money was barely enough to cover the bills, let alone anything extra. His small apartment barely had enough space for him and his daughter, but he made it work. His daughter Emma was the light of his life. At 7 years old, she had a way of lighting up any room with her smile, and her laughter was the only thing that made the long hours bearable. She didn't ask for much, just time and love. She didn't mind the worn-out clothes, the mismatched furniture, or the fact that their apartment didn't have a fancy backyard. All she wanted was him, and for her birthday she wanted to feel special. It wasn't easy. Every year he found a way to make her birthday special, no matter how small. A cake, some candles and a homemade card were enough to bring her joy. This year things were harder than ever. He had barely managed to scrape together enough for the simple cake. His heart broke when he had to pass on all the fancier ones. He couldn't afford the extravagant cupcakes or the chocolate-covered treats, but this was something he could manage. It wasn't much, but it would be enough for Emma. Despite the comment from the rich lady, he didn't let it deter him. He'd heard judgmental remarks before, and he knew not to let them sink in. He was doing the best he could. For Emma, it was all worth it. She deserved to feel loved and celebrated, no matter what the world outside thought. As he placed the cake on the counter and fumbled through his wallet to pay, his mind wandered to Emma's face when she saw the cake, her eyes lighting up with excitement. That was all he needed. That small, simple moment of happiness was everything. The rich lady, on the other hand, continued to browse the bakery, oblivious to the single dad's struggle. She examined the pastries as though everything was perfect in her world, completely unaware that a man standing only a few feet away was working tirelessly to give his daughter the best birthday he could manage. She picked out a beautifully decorated tart and casually strolled toward the counter, completely absorbed in her own world, never noticing the quiet sacrifice unfolding right before her eyes. The single dad stepped out of the bakery, the simple cake clutched tightly in his hands, a small smile creeping onto his face as he thought about Emma's reaction when she saw it. But before he could take another step, his phone rang. He hesitated, glancing down at the screen. It was his boss. With a sigh, he answered. "Hello? Hey, I need you to head out of town." His boss's voice crackled through the line. "We've got a last-minute job that needs attention. I know it's short notice, but we can't afford to wait. You need to leave now." The dad's stomach twisted in knots. He tried to steady his voice, but the words caught in his throat. "But it's my daughter's birthday today," he explained, his voice soft. I can't miss it." There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a sigh. I know, but this is important. You have to go. I'll take care of everything else." The dad felt the weight of those words sink deep into his chest. He couldn't be there for Emma. He couldn't watch her blow out the candles on her cake. The thought of missing her special day felt like a punch to the gut. His heart dropped as he ended the call, standing outside the bakery for a long moment, staring blankly at the ground. The cake in his hand suddenly seemed insignificant in the face of everything he was about to miss. As he stood there, lost in his thoughts, the rich lady had exited the bakery and was heading toward her car. But then she stopped, noticing the dad standing still, his shoulders slumped, and his expression one of deep disappointment. She watched him for a moment, sensing that something wasn't right. He was speaking softly into his phone, his brow furrowed with concern. As he hung up, she overheard him say, "I can't miss her birthday. I won't be there." A pang of guilt washed over the rich lady as she realized what was happening. The man wasn't just buying a cheap cake because he couldn't afford anything better. He was trying to make a special day for his daughter, and now, he was being pulled away from her by work. It dawned on her that he was a single dad, likely struggling to juggle the weight of his responsibilities. Her heart twisted as she thought back to her earlier judgment. She had dismissed him so easily, assuming he was just another man who couldn't manage his money. But now, seeing his distress, she realized how wrong she had been. Her gaze softened, and she felt a deep regret for the way she had treated him, for the cruel words that had slipped from her mouth. She wanted to do something to make it right, but what? She didn't know yet. But one thing was certain, she couldn't just walk away. The rich lady stood frozen for a moment, torn between walking away or doing something, anything, to make up for the hurt she had caused. She had judged the man so harshly, dismissing him without knowing anything about his life. The reality of the situation was sinking in now, and it made her stomach churn with guilt. She watched as the single dad stood there, still clutching the cake, his eyes distant. He was clearly lost in his thoughts, his disappointment palpable. His daughter's birthday was slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do about it. Taking a deep breath, the rich lady walked toward him. She hesitated for a moment before speaking, unsure of how to begin. Finally, she gathered the courage to approach him. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I owe you an apology." The dad looked up in surprise, his face still etched with the sadness of his earlier phone call. "What do you mean?" he asked, confused. "I was wrong," she continued, her voice steady now. "Earlier, I judged you. I assumed things about you, and I shouldn't have. I was rude and thoughtless, and I'm really sorry. She looked him directly in the eyes, hoping he could see her sincerity. He stood there, stunned. The rich lady's apology was unexpected, and for a moment, he didn't know what to say. The last thing he had expected was for the woman to acknowledge her mistake, let alone apologize. He opened his mouth to respond, but words failed him. I know I can't undo what I said, she added, her voice soft, but I'd like to do something to help. Your daughter deserves a celebration, and you deserve to be there for her. I'd like to buy a new cake, a better one, one that you can be proud to give her. Let's go together, and I'll make sure you have something to celebrate with her. The dad blinked, still processing the unexpected kindness. He had no idea what to make of it. At first he was hesitant, unsure of how to respond to such a generous offer from someone he'd never even spoken to before. But as the weight of the situation hit him, he realized something. He didn't want to miss his daughter's birthday, and this kind woman was offering a chance to make it right. Are you sure? He asked, his voice shaky. I don't want to impose. The rich lady smiled warmly. No, not at all, it's the least I can do. Let's make this day special for her. Tears welled up in the dad's eyes as he nodded slowly. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I just wanted to make her feel special. She's been through so much, and all I want is for her to have a day where she feels loved. The rich lady's heart softened even more, and she gently placed a hand on his shoulder. She's lucky to have a father who cares so much, she said. Together, they walked back into the bakery, ready to pick out the perfect cake for Emma. The dad, still overwhelmed, could hardly believe this stranger was doing something so kind. It wasn't just the cake, it was the gesture, the recognition of his struggle, and the support that meant more than anything. As the rich lady and the single dad walked back into the bakery together, there was a quiet understanding between them. The dad, still feeling overwhelmed by the offer, had no words to express his gratitude, but his eyes spoke volumes. The rich lady, on the other hand, felt a shift in her heart as they approached the cake display. She glanced at the cakes with a new perspective, noticing the intricate decorations, the beautiful colors, and the careful attention to detail that went into each one. She found herself questioning what truly made something special. Was it the price or the thought behind it? She could no longer dismiss the idea that the true value of any occasion lay in the love and effort put into it. As they picked out a cake, she asked the bakery clerk to write "Happy Birthday, Emma" on it in big bold letters. It was a small touch, but one that would make a world of difference to the little girl. As the clerk worked, the rich lady turned to the single dad. I know it's not much, she said softly, her voice almost sheepish, but I really hope this makes her day special. The dad nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. It's more than I could have ever hoped for, he admitted. I just wanted her to know that she's loved, that she's important. This means everything to me. The rich lady's heart swelled with emotion, and she realized how much she had taken for granted in her own life. She had never truly understood the sacrifices others made for the people they loved. Standing there, in the quiet of the bakery, she realized that her actions had not been about kindness, but about ego. She was embarrassed by how easily she had judged the man earlier, not knowing the full story. Once the cake was ready, the rich lady insisted on paying for it, along with a small bouquet of flowers for Emma. As they walked to the dad's car, she added, I'll be thinking of you and your daughter. I hope you both have a wonderful celebration. The dad could barely find the words to thank her again, but his eyes were filled with appreciation. When he got home, he set up the cake, lit the candles, and sang "Happy Birthday" to Emma. The moment felt perfect, more perfect than he ever thought it could be. As he watched Emma's face light up, he realized that this day was more than about the cake or the party. It was about the love they shared, the little moments that made everything worthwhile. And with the rich lady's kindness, that love had been made even stronger. As the rich lady watched the single dad drive away with his daughter, the weight of the day settled on her heart. She had learned more in these few hours than she had in years of living a life of privilege. She realized that money didn't define a person's worth. It never had. What truly mattered was love, effort, and the small, everyday sacrifices people made for those they cared about. The rich lady thought back to her earlier behavior, the way she had judged the dad without knowing anything about him. She had assumed that his worn clothes and humble cake meant he didn't care, when in reality, they were signs of a father who would do anything for his daughter. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to make things right. As she stood there, a soft smile crossed her face. The simple act of buying a cake had been a small gesture, but she could already tell it had made a world of difference. She had helped create a moment of joy, a memory that would last for years. The dad and his daughter had turned to wave, a heartfelt thank you in their eyes. He didn't have to say much, his gratitude was written all over his face. The rich lady smiled back, knowing that her small act of kindness had been just enough to make this birthday special. She felt proud of herself, not for the cake or the flowers, but for choosing to look beyond her own life and understand the struggles of someone else. The world didn't need more judgment, she thought. It needed more kindness. And today, she had been part of that kindness. It was a feeling that would stay with her for a long time. As the rich lady walked out of the bakery, she felt different, changed in a way she hadn't anticipated when she first stepped through the door. Her usual sense of superiority had melted away, replaced by a newfound understanding. She had spent so much of her life equating wealth with value, but now she knew that true wealth wasn't about how much you had. It was about how much you were willing to give, how much kindness you offered to others, and how deeply you could empathize with their struggles. The act of helping the single dad and his daughter had left a mark on her, one that would shape her perspective moving forward. She smiled to herself as she left the bakery, a sense of peace settling over her. She was determined to carry this lesson with her, to be more compassionate and understanding in the future, and to recognize the true worth in the people around her, not in their possessions, but in their hearts. Meanwhile, the dad walked away with a heart full of gratitude. Despite the struggles he faced, he knew one thing for sure: he and his daughter were lucky. They had each other, and no matter how small the birthday celebration, they would always find joy in the love they shared. He felt lighter now, the weight of missing his daughter's special day, lifted by the kindness of a stranger. The unexpected gesture had reminded him that, sometimes the world could be kinder than he ever expected. Thank you for watching this heartwarming story. It's a reminder that kindness can come from unexpected places, and it's never too late to make a difference in someone's life. We hope this story touched your heart as much as it did ours. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, and share with your friends and family. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the story, so feel free to leave a comment below, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on more heartwarming stories like this. Thank you for your support, and we can't wait to share more with you.